Never allow your enemy, or in this case, someone who thinks you are their enemy, to define you. For centuries, people in different religious traditions have defined atheists and agnostics and said they must fit this certain way of being. But today we're going to look at different types of non-believers who do not fit the religious mold. And after that, I'm going to give a challenge to atheists and agnostics to up their game a bit. This is Mental Contraband. Hi, I'm James Christian, and this is Mental Contraband, the show for people who dare to question the unquestionable rules of family, religion, and society. And I always like to end the show with something fun or humorous, so stick around for the joke at the end. Come for the topic, stay for the jokes. Just a quick note about programming on the channel. The last video was a topic about how different people perceive racism, and so as that may suggest, over time, the channel will expand into different topics. And really, the whole goal of this channel is about living a great life. But to set a foundation, I felt it was important to focus on some of the worldview topics initially. But long term, there are some plans to expand into broader topics. So definitely subscribe to make sure you're a part of that great journey. But for today, we're going to look at the way I'm going to mostly focus on Christians because that's the background I grew up with, but you could apply this to a lot of different religious worldviews. But I grew up in a Christian circle, and the way non-believers were usually presented were as a combination of Mr. Hyde, Mr. Burns, Vlad the Impaler, the Marquis de Sade, and throw in Hitler and Stalin for good measure. It was always just a caricature of just complete evil, people who wanted to inflict pain and who you should be very scared to be around. And the Bible has a very famous passage that people often take to reinforce this idea, which comes from Psalm 14. But let's look at the context of that real quick. I'm going to read it rather quickly, but here it is. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have committed detestable acts. There is no one who does good. The Lord has looked down from heaven upon the sons of mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. They have all turned aside. Together they are corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Do all the workers of injustice not know, who devour my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? There they are in great dread, for God is with a righteous generation. You would put to shame the plan of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that the salvation of Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, Jacob will rejoice, Israel will be glad. So clearly from the context, when it says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, it's not talking about just any random non-believer. It's talking about specifically people who are denying the God of Israel and are coming to attack Israel and are hurting them, that are causing, what did it say? It says they are corrupt, they've committed detestable acts, they are not doing good, they are causing injustice, they're devouring my people as they eat bread. All of these things. They are also putting to shame the plan of the poor, all of these different things. So they are causing a lot of harm and hurt. And the reason the author is saying they are fools is because they are saying there's no one who's going to hold us to account. We can come and hurt people and conquer nations, and no one's going to hold us to justice. We can be unjust, and who's going to stop us? And so if you put that into modern language, atheists would often argue the same thing. You could write it as saying, who are these people today who think there are no police and there are no courts and there are no juries and there's no cost for treating people horribly? There's no cost for committing crimes and destroying property and killing people and all of those kind of things. So most people throughout history would generally agree with this sentiment that it is foolish to think there are no consequences for your actions. And that's essentially what's happening. In the Old Testament, the Psalm, it's saying that God is the one who's going to bring justice. And so the people are foolish for saying, oh, this person doesn't exist because there's no system in place that's going to call us to account. But in modern ways of thinking about the world, there are definitely systems that do call people into account. So that's a big part of what it is. So it's not talking about just anyone who never believes in God because they've looked at evidence and made a decision out of their convictions. It's talking about people who are denying a source of justice. At this point, I think it's helpful to distinguish between atheism and agnosticism and being completely worldviewless. So there are people who just have never really given much thought to the world around them. And so I would consider them worldviewless, which generally tends to default to atheism, because usually if you're going to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever, you've put some level of thought into just thinking about how the world must exist and what types of systems of justice and ethics and cosmology and the afterlife and all that must exist. And so you're usually going to have a little bit of thought to get to that point. Although if you just grow up in a default Christian world, then you might essentially be worldviewless in that sense that you just go along with whatever there is and you haven't really given a lot of thought to challenging it one way or another. But then there are atheists and agnostics who have truly looked at the evidence. They have wrestled with these issues. They have tried to seek truth, and that's where they've come out, that they just aren't convinced that the claims of a certain religion are correct, and they're doing the best they can, and they might change their views over time, and they truly appreciate the journey that it takes to grow and become aware of these things. So that's very different from the fool that said in his heart, there is no God. So we should not equate those two things. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge there are nonbelievers who can cause harm to religious people, and vice versa, religious people who can cause harm to people of other religions and non-religious people. So let's break some of these down. I'm going to look at 5 different types of non-believers and the challenge that that creates for people of all worldviews and what we can aspire to. Sorry to be looking at my phone, but I just wrote them down here. I'll read them off here and then we can talk about them. So the first group, which to me is the most damaging, is people who actually celebrate evil and destruction and corruption of all that's good. Like I said, I mean, people who, like Vlad the Impaler was a real person. And at least I haven't done deep research for this video on him, but just the way history views him of just being someone who relished in causing the suffering of his enemies. And there are definitely people today who just seem to thrive on hurting people, and they enjoy taking away innocence, and they're very sadistic, but not in a consensual way. They just enjoy causing people to suffer. And I think most people of most worldviews rightly look at that as just despicable. There have certainly been people in religious guises who have done those things, and there are certainly people today who would consider themselves atheists and do those things. And I think in general, that's just a very small percentage of the population. We are appalled at those things because they're out there, but they're also rare. And so we want to definitely avoid that kind of stuff. Frequently, people who get to that level went through a lot of suffering themselves. And a lot of times it's a warped call for help. It's like they want someone else to feel how bad they feel, and that doesn't justify it. But it should make us realize it is a small percentage of the population that is that way, and to put all of one group into that category is just not being honest. And so we can all do better on that. So let's rightly look at that as a bad thing, but also look at reality of the most of the people you're going to deal with and move on to that. The next one is the aimless pleasure seeker. This is the one who I essentially said is worldviewless. Technically, they are often de facto atheists, but they haven't really put a lot of thought into this. So basically, they're aimless, directionless people who mainly live for momentary pleasure, what economists would call low time preference. They just want things immediately now, and they haven't given much attention to ethical pursuits. These people are ripe for conversion by religions. I actually think religions can help these people in some ways because they are offering them some sense of meaning and purpose to their lives. If people are just going along day by day and not really giving much thought to all these things, when someone comes along and says, hey, here is purpose, here's how you can do something with your life, here's how you can help others, here's how you can contribute something of value, then that is very appealing. And I think most people are generally unhappy existing in that state. And when you can have a sense of identity and meaning and belonging, that can help elevate your life to a higher living standard. And that's generally a good thing. Now, I think religion also brings many other difficulties that are going to cause problems for those people, but that can at least get them started on thinking about things like that. You can also do the same thing with agnosticism and atheism. You can find purpose, you can find meaning, you can find belonging. It's just a different route. And sometimes because of the way our society is structured, that can be difficult, but it is possible. And so that'll be a topic for another video. But I do think if you're just going along with no purpose, no meaning, no belonging, no community, then that is something that ultimately, because of your human nature, you are going to want to seek. And so I do think that's a way that non-believers in that category can step up their game. Try to find a community, try to find a place where you can belong, where you can contribute and add value to other people. And ultimately, I think your life will be more satisfying if you do. The third category, and this is one I find a lot of religious people have very little compassion for, and this is a place where I find religion does do a lot of harm. This is the person with religious trauma. Those who have experienced deep trauma from religion and have not yet found healing. They hate the thing that traumatized them, and they're also concerned it might traumatize others. Now, in your religious experience, there may have never been any harm that caused trauma to other people, though I would suspect you're likely just oblivious to it. But that does happen. And so just know that you may not be in a position to help these people. They do need help. They probably need to go see a counselor and process some of the things that have happened to them. And just know they have dealt with a lot. And so someone coming from a circle that caused damage to them, they're probably not going to be very open to talking to you about it. Or it's going to come across oftentimes angry. And so a lot of times people think this is the angry atheist. And to me, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. The person comes along thinking they're doing good by bringing the goodness of their religion. This person was traumatized by people saying the same things, but then doing things that were very hurtful to them. Then they lash out at that thing because that's what they associate it with. Then the believer looks at them as like, wow, they really hate God and they really hate religion and they hate us and they are our enemy. And it's just not a healthy cycle. And so understand that people are dealing with that. They may not have all the words for it. They just know that the things you're saying in their past experience, they associate with hurt and harm and control and sometimes abuse. And if someone's coming at you angry, it's really not about you. And if you are in that situation where you're the person who was hurt by religion, then yeah, definitely please do get help. This is part of why this channel exists, to offer sources and perspectives that will help people come out of that. But if someone just talking to you is creating those strong feelings of anger and resentment, then it probably would be good to seek a professional therapist or someone who can help you process some of that. And ultimately, I just want thriving for everyone. So it makes me sad when I see that. So definitely seek help if you need it. The fourth type of non-believer is what I would call the unexamined secularist. This is like what Socrates says about the unexamined life. And it's just generally well-meaning people who haven't bothered to look too deeply into religious claims, and they generally see them as outdated superstitions. They can often be condescending and think they're smarter than believers. They incline toward scientism and often replace religion with political activism. They usually have not explored ethics with any real depth, or at least they don't believe that religious people have. What I mean by scientism is people who look at religion versus science and thinks that you have to pick a team completely, and I'm on team science, so therefore I'm against all religion. And unfortunately, a lot of religious people do something similar where they reject a lot of well-grounded science because it challenges their religious beliefs. There is a proper balance. You can ultimately believe that religious claims are not true, but you don't have to look at the people who believe them as complete idiots and dismiss them on that ground alone. And likewise, you can take science, examine it, and look at if you should possibly change your worldviews because of certain things, or at least re-examine them. That's not to say there aren't dumb religious claims out there. There are a lot of people who just believe complete nonsense, and with any level of follow-up questions, their whole worldview just completely falls apart. So I'm not saying to give all religious views equal weight, but I am saying there are serious religious people who have truly looked at science and looked at different philosophies, and they've come to believe that a certain thing is true, and they have deep convictions for those reasons, and they're not idiots. If you read people like Augustine or Thomas Aquinas or John Calvin or C.S. Lewis or people like that, they're not idiots. They have given a lot of thought to these things. And so I think it's good to understand where they're coming from and understand their perspective, and also give equal thought to your views and have productive dialogues. That's where people grow. So don't just dismiss people as idiots. So what I said is the unexamined secularist is just somebody who hasn't really given a lot of thought to a lot of these things. And then they look at other religious people who also haven't given a lot of thought to these things, and then they criticize them for that. So I would just say, don't criticize someone for the same thing you're doing. Like, actually examine these things deeply, and you will see there's people of all worldviews in all cultures in all times who have deeply thought about some things, and they deserve to be engaged with on a respectful ground. And finally, that brings me to the nonbeliever profile number 5. This is the earnest truth seeker. People who are genuinely seeking truth, goodness, self-actualization, and a healthy psychological state for themselves and their loved ones. And they honestly find a particular religion is lacking in multiple areas. They are willing to have their beliefs challenged and follow truth wherever it leads, but they also maintain a healthy skepticism and protection of personal well-being. They are fully aware of religious teachings and have found that a lot of those teachings fall short in helping others thrive. So this is the type of non-believer that the church just generally doesn't like to acknowledge. They're people who have looked at a religious claim, a religious worldview, and they've found that they don't meet their ethical standard. And so they're not going to follow that religion because they believe in something better or higher. And they're always seeking truth. They're always seeking the best thing they can. And frankly, your religion hasn't done it for them. They don't believe it actually is the best thing. They believe there's something better, more truthful, kinder, more ethical, and they're going to keep pursuing that. Maybe they're mistaken about your religion, and you could persuade them that they've been looking at it wrong. But in general, they are people who are serious and care a lot about creating the best life for themselves and their loved ones and the whole world around them. And they are pursuing those higher goals. And it's just disingenuous to say these people don't exist. And it's just not true when you put these people in the category of the angry atheist or the evil sadist or the person who's just constantly seeking pleasure with no thought for the future. No, these are people who do care about the future and want to understand life as deeply as they can. I would say that's a goal for all of us to aspire to. Whatever your worldview is, seek truth, seek the best life for yourself, for your loved ones, for the world around you. Add value to people's lives and grow to be the best you can be. That's the goal for all of us. So let's do a quick recap. Nonbelievers are not the cartoon character that they're often portrayed to be, of glorifying evil and essentially being Satanists who don't believe in God. But there are people who enjoy hurting people. That's category one. There are aimless and directionless people who mainly exist for pleasure and don't have a strong sense of belonging and purpose. And if that's you, then definitely step it up. There are people who have experienced deep trauma from religion, and I think these people deserve compassion. If that is you, just be aware that when you're talking to religious people, you coming across as super angry is not going to help you or them either. There are people who have the unexamined life, who just haven't really done a lot of investigating of other people's worldviews, and they look at everyone else as superstitious and ignorant, and that's not true. And it would be good to understand where other people are coming from, and it's good if they extend the same courtesy to you. So try to understand what your worldview is, challenge your worldview, explore different ideas, and grow and become the best person you can. And then finally, there are the people who've done that have become the best people they can and are continuing to grow and will continue to get even better as they pursue life's journey. So let me know if this provides some helpful perspectives. Whatever your background, whether you're religious or not religious, what's been your experience? Which of these types have you most encountered? Did I leave out any types that I should have included? And if you're a non-believer, do any of these resonate with some of your struggles? Are there some you relate to more than others? And that if you truly examine your life, you realize, oh, yeah, I could step it up a bit and work on this part of my life. Whatever your situation is, I'd love to hear your perspectives. I always like to end with a joke or something fun. I'm going to go ahead and apologize on this one. It's a pretty cheesy joke, but it's what I got. So here you go. How do you know when a volcano has done well in school? When it graduates magna cum laude. Thanks for watching. If any part of this video has been enjoyable to you, please like and subscribe, and definitely give me your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.